If you have a true scary story you want to share, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I grew up in the deep woods of mid-coast Maine, in a town consisting of one small store, one smaller post office, and a population of fewer than 800 people, most of which were over the age of 60. The town was old and tired, and needless to say, there weren't many options in the way of exciting activities for young teens. My friends and I would often stay up all night and take sunrise walks down familiar winding roads in the early hours of the morning. Golden Ridge Road, my road, earned its name in October as the trees lined the street with golden foliage. It was beautiful, but truthfully, these walks were motivated by stolen menthol cigarettes, 2 beers split 3 ways, and the occasional pinch of weed smoked through modified aluminum cans. It wasn't much, but it was something to do. One late night, when I was roughly 14 years old, 3 friends and I decided to take a sunrise walk down to a small field at the end of a long twisted road. The field was bordered by the road on one side and thick tree line on the other. In the field stood a tall, skinny tree in the dead center of the clearing. We took our time on the walk, stopping frequently, and by the time we got to the field, the sun had fully risen. To our shock, in the field was a young woman, roughly in her late teens, wearing a very old-style nightgown, 17th or 18th century, a bonnet and no shoes, frolicking and dancing at 5 a.m. Our first reaction was to pretend like we didn't see her so as to not scare her, or call attention to ourselves. Growing up in an extremely small town, you tend to get to know who lives nearby, and I had never seen this girl before. Not only was she under the age of 60, but she was also very beautiful. Myself being a lonely hormonal teenage boy, I would have remembered. Surprised and confused, we continued to walk when abruptly the girl stopped dancing. She looked straight at us and quickly sprinted to the lone tree in the center of the field. She appeared to be trying to hide from us, which seemed strange because we had clearly already seen her, and also because the tree was slightly too skinny to properly hide behind, especially with a wispy nightgown. We continued walking down the road, curiously peering at the stranger out of confusion, when all of a sudden she vanished. All 4 of us witnessed this girl go from unsuccessfully hiding to completely gone. Her frame went behind the skinny tree on one side and did not reappear on the other side. In disbelief, we began walking around the tree searching for any plausible explanation for the girl's whereabouts. We had no intention of scaring or harming her, but we had to investigate. Sure enough, she was gone. There were no low branches to climb the tree, nor were there enough leaves to conceal a person that somehow managed to shimmy their way up undetected. There was no cover above. Also, the forest that bordered the field was far too great a distance to make a run for it without being seen. Had she moved 1 foot towards the woods, we would have seen it. Upon telling the events of the night to my older brother, he noted that this area was a hotspot for brutal battles and slaughters between Native American tribes and early colonists of 17th century Maine. He said that many people died here, and the whole region is widely known to be haunted, especially the woods. Even if he was just trying to mess with me, every word he said was true. Was this girl a ghost? Was she a victim in those slaughters? Did she know she was dead? If it was a ghost, it seemed like she was having a good time before we showed up. Hopefully we didn't scare her. Hopefully she exists in a perpetual state of blissful freedom, only to occasionally be interrupted by teenage wannabe stoners. So, that's my ghost story. It's not as scary as it is interesting. Scary or not, I'm glad that I didn't witness this alone. Having friends to share this experience with made a world of difference in how I processed this event, and my mental well-being in general. My biggest fear is not to witness cryptids or the paranormal, but to witness them alone, leaving doubt to the grounds of your own sanity. I live in a small city on the East Coast in a one-bedroom apartment with my girlfriend and our cat, Vader. The story takes place on a weekend that my girlfriend was out of town visiting her family. I'm in my mid-30s now, so I'm not the partier that I was in my 20s. My idea of a good solo weekend nowadays includes working on my music and watching cheesy action movies with my cat. The layout of my apartment is important to understand the following events that took place. My living room couch faces the TV. Directly to the right of the TV is the door to our bedroom, which swings inwards towards the room and away from the couch. If you're watching TV and the bedroom door is open, then the bedroom is in your peripheral vision. With that being said, one night I was watching a movie with the lights dimmed, the bedroom light off and its door half open. All of a sudden, I noticed a rounded head-size outline that appeared to be sticking out from behind the door at about eye level. I stared at this strange shape for a minute or so, trying to figure out what it could be. I was puzzled by the silhouette, but it was a dark shape in a darker room, so the profile is all that I saw. Though it seemed odd, initially I thought it might be part of the laundry bag that hangs off the inside of the door. I thought maybe the bag had broke or had partially fallen off the top of the door that held it up. But it was the wrong shape and height to be any part of the laundry bag. Then I thought maybe it was my black cat doing some new weird door hanging trick, but he was fast asleep in his bed. I was trying to figure out what this mysterious thing was, and as I was looking directly at it, the figure abruptly ducked out of sight. It had moved right in front of my eyes. Realizing that it was not the silhouette of some inanimate object, I immediately assumed that someone had broken into my apartment and was hiding in my bedroom, watching me. Being absolutely horrified, I jumped up, ran to my bathroom, and locked the door. The shape had no features, so if it was a person, they must have been wearing some kind of black mask or something. I stood in the bathroom for 10 minutes repeating, "What the hell was that?" over and over to myself. I would have called 911 to report a break-in, but my phone was on the coffee table right in front of where I saw the figure. After forcing myself to calm down a bit doing some breathing exercises, I mustered the courage to grab the biggest knives that I could find in my kitchen and confront the intruder. I had not heard any movement in the apartment, so I knew nothing had left. Butcher's knives in one hand and a serrated bread knife in the other, I approached the bedroom door, yelling, "I saw you in there and the cops are on the way. I have 2 big knives, and if you come out now, I'll let you leave without violence." No response. The light switch for the bedroom is outside the room behind the TV, so I turned the bedroom light on and barged in screaming like a lunatic, yielding kitchen knives. My plan was to scare the intruder by acting crazy. Alas, the room was empty. It's a small room with nowhere to hide, with one small window, 3 stories above the street, with no ledge to climb out on. In addition, there was an air conditioner in the window that was very difficult to move and impossible to put back onto place from the outside. The only door leading out of our apartment is right next to the bathroom where I initially took shelter, and I was positive that nothing had gone by or opened that door. The apartment is old and creaky, so it's impossible to cross the hall or open the door silently. Upon realizing that it could not have been a person, my fear and adrenaline kicked back in. Again, I started repeating, "What the hell was that? What the hell was that?" I had heard stories about what some referred to as shadow people, And based on those descriptions and what I saw, that was the closest I could come to an answer. Eventually, I decided that, unless I came to peace with the creature, there was no way I could sleep in that apartment. I'd been living there for 10 years, and I had never seen anything out of the ordinary before. I reasoned that if, in 10 years, the worst thing that it had done to me was to let me catch a glimpse of it, it probably wasn't malevolent. I began talking out loud to the shadow creature and tried to bargain with it, asking it to keep to itself, and I'll try to do the same. I believe that I stated that we could live in harmony, and since that night, I have not seen anything strange in my apartment, and I hope to never see it again. While I don't count myself among the religious, I do feel a sense of spirituality about me. This was confirmed many years ago, just days after my father's sudden passing. It was mid-December of 1992, and I was fortunate to have my entire family with me to see a Christmas play at a local theater. It was then back to my house for a meal of homemade chili and tamales, my dad's favorite dish. This was the first time we were all together since Thanksgiving, and I was so pleased that they all enjoyed my dinner, especially my dad. My dad was a quiet man and did not engage in conversation, but my relationship with him was good, albeit without much communication. We said our goodbyes for the evening, and I felt pleased for planning a nice get-together. The next day I was giving a final, I'm a college professor, when I was interrupted by one of our campus security officers who gave me a note that simply read "emergency" with an unknown phone number. I rushed back to my office, got my office mate to proctor the rest of the exam, and called the number. To my surprise, my brother answered the phone. He was in the waiting room at the local hospital. I asked him what was up, and his simple reply was, "Dad is dead." I was in shock. We had just been together the night before. Dad looked so healthy without any indication that he might have had a health issue. In a daze, I went back to my classroom and in a very calm voice asked my colleague if she could stay until the students were finished, that my dad had just died and that I needed to be with my family. She was more emotional than I was, as she embraced me. I believe it was shock that kept me calm. On the ride over to my sister's home, the entire realization of my father's passing caught up with me and I could barely contain myself. It was difficult to maintain my driving, but I was in a complete emotional meltdown. I've never cried so deeply before and have never since. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. It was my brother who opened the door to my sister's home, and without warning, grabbed me, looked me directly in the eye and said, You knew. He was referring to the evening that I had planned the night before. Not really processing what he meant and still reeling from my dad's sudden death, I just kept repeating, No, I had no idea this would happen. We all sat motionless and almost silent for what seemed like an eternity, all in disbelief, all in shared grief, until we said our goodbyes and parted ways. When I went to my car, it was early morning and dark. As I opened the door, I noticed a small, shiny object. Looking down, I saw a dime on the asphalt, next to the open door. I hadn't noticed it before. It didn't fall from my pocket or escape from my car, but there it was. I picked it up with a sense of disbelief and hope. You see, I grew up in a working-class household. My dad never finished high school, and my mom for the most part stayed home to raise us 3 kids. For as long as I can remember, my dad had a second job and would work at menial tasks, usually relegated for high school kids. But he never complained or thought anything was beneath him. When I was a teen and my social life was expanding, he would always say to me as I was exiting the house for a party or football game, "Hey, do you have a dime?" My response was always, "Of course I do, Dad." Money was tight, and he could never offer me anything more than that, but he knew that having a dime meant that he was just a phone call away. This year will mark the 32nd anniversary of my dad's passing, and I think of him often. I now have 2 grown children of my own, and through hard work and a work ethic that my dad gave me, I'm able to provide for my family. And while I can give them more than 10 cents, it's still that simple dime that has made me wealthy beyond belief. To give context, I'm from a small country in South America, and attended a religious school every year. You go to this sort of spiritual getaway in a camp situated in an open field next to a small river in the sort of forested mountain area. Said place is beautiful, but gives an off vibe, like it's lost in time due to its very old structures. Because of this, the place has been shrouded in mysteries and horror stories. It doesn't help that the whole town was once burned to the ground in a very gruesome war that almost wiped my country off the map in the 1800s. So, here's what happened. It was my last year in school, our last camp. After a long day of all of my classes, I was tired from hiking in the forest next to the camp. So after dinner and a short stay at a campfire, we were sent to bed. My class was made mostly of women. We were very few men, only 6, including me, so we had the whole dorm hall for all of us. This dorm, which was housing only 6 teens, was a long hall full of bunks made for at least 40 people. Since we didn't have to share, we all chose top bunks next to each other, 3 on my side, including me, and 3 on the row facing me. It was about midnight, and we would just lie there, talking, joking, and laughing in the dark since the lights were out. After a couple of minutes, I fell asleep. I woke up at what I would assume was between 2 to 3 a.m. I rose my head from the sheets to see my best friend in his bunk in front of me, also raising his head. He nods jokingly to the bunk next to him, where another classmate was sleeping. When I turned to see the silhouette of my classmate just standing, staring at his bed, I laugh quietly and nod to my friend as to play a prank on him, and then before we could act, I see the silhouette crouch and notice that my classmate was fully asleep in his bed. Almost at the same time, my friend and I react and look at each other wide-eyed. Both of us cover ourselves in our sheets, doing our best to fall asleep. Somehow we managed to do so. The next morning, I went straight to my friend, and before I could finish asking if he saw it, he interrupted with a "yes," and he told me exactly what he saw. It was the same thing. We approached this classmate and explained it to him. Of course, he thought we were joking. Both me and my friend remember that event to this day, talking about it every now and then, almost 7 to 8 years after it happened. This is a real story. It would have been one thing if I was the only one to see it, but the fact that my friend saw the exact same thing that I did, it gave me the biggest chills. The OP actually sent me a message with a little more context and information that they wanted me to share. So, I'm from Paraguay, a rather small country that was almost destroyed in a war against 3 countries in the late 1800s, known as the bloodiest conflict in South America. By the end of the war, Paraguay was using literal children to fight, since we lost 90% of the male population. There's a reason why I'm telling you this. We have many legends and myths, and one of them is Cassandra, very similar to the Weeping Lady, or La Llorona. She's a woman that forever looks for the bodies of her 2 sons, who were killed in very real battle, which saw the deaths of thousands of kids. She supposedly tends to be crying and calling for the children in places near the water, and by night, she'll appear in the rooms of kids, trying to take them with her. It's a very popular camp horror story, but the parallels are notable for what happened. Contrary to the girls' dorm room, which was located in a building near the entrance from the campsite, our dorm was way further, very close to this small river and forest, to the point that you could hear the water flow. Also, the way the whole thing unfolded in retrospect was almost a textbook copy of the tale. This figure behaved similar to the story. When we thought it was still our friend getting ready to climb back into his bunk, we noticed that it would just stay still in front of the bed, almost as if it knew we were watching. It crouched slowly as my actual friend turned around in his bed fully asleep. To answer the question of could it be somebody else, I had clear visual of every classmate, including the one that was awake with me. Everyone was in bed. Could it have been a teacher? Well, no teacher or groundskeeper was staying with us. Whatever that thing was, it was not one of us. I just spoke with my friend who witnessed everything, and he also remembers it in full detail. I asked him if he saw what the figure looked like since his bunk was next to it, and he said that at first the silhouette kind of looked like our classmate, but something about it was off. He said that before crouching, it turned, and he couldn't make out which direction it was staring at. Every time I remember this, my heart sinks. What's worse than having one of your neighbors stalk you? When they still do it after they're dead. In 1991, I was living in a small one-bedroom apartment in Nampa, Idaho. The complex was shaped like an L with only 5 units on both sides. Back then, the rent was cheap, only $225 a month. If only we could bring that back. All but one of my neighbors were nice and kept the noise down. I was in my early 20s living alone working an office job. I'd only been living there a couple of months before the trouble started. I would notice sounds of movement behind and around my apartment at all hours when I was home, off and on. I always kept my doors locked. The biggest giveaway was the time I finished a phone call and heard the scattering of gravel outside my bedroom window. I flipped the curtain aside and saw him. Some guy was hunched over and running away. I was irritated the stranger had been listening in on my phone conversation. It made me more nervous knowing that he was the same one who had been sneaking around trying to get glimpses of me through my window, through gaps in the curtains. I decided that if it escalated, I was gonna tell the landlady. Fast forward to the last month of September, I was watching TV when I heard a commotion of ambulances and fire trucks in the parking lot. I went outside to see my landlady smoking and staring at the scene. I tried asking a cop what was going on, but he said he wasn't allowed to tell me. But the landlady did. She said the young 20-something man 3 doors down from me had been fighting with 2 other women in the apartment. He had stabbed both of them, and then himself. I watched the ER team carry the bodies out to the ambulance and drive away. One of the bodies had been my peeping Tom. The spying stopped, or so I thought. 2 months later, I awoke to see a faceless, long, black, swirling man-shaped cloud hovering above me. To make it creepier, he was looking back and forth from my face to my body. I knew what he was about to do, so I screamed at him to get off of me. He flew backwards into the wall behind me, and changed into a smaller, weaker version of a more solid shadow form until he disappeared into the wall. I slept out in the living room for a while. The last incident that made me move out was 3 weeks later. He woke me up by sitting on my bed. I could even feel his weight making my feet roll into him as he looked down to me. That did it. I moved out a couple of weeks later. I only saw him one more time 4 years later. My sister lived in that same complex and had a 1-year-old daughter. I babysat sometimes. She was in her crib in her room, and I sat on the living room couch reading. when I saw a faint shadow stand behind the light. This light sat in front of me on a tall stand and had a dimmer switch. The light faded off and on slowly 3 times, and then the shadow stepped away to who knows where. Peeping Tom was back, and he remembered me. I never understood why he was so obsessed with me, but at least he doesn't follow me anymore. I wonder if he's still there, or if he moved on. There have been a lot more strange paranormal occurrences in my life, but that's just one example. Maybe I'll include those in another post, and thank you, Raven, for listening. Greetings, Raven. First off, I want to say that I'm a newer listener, but in this short time and countless episodes later, I've become a big fan of what you do, from the content matter to your delivery of user-submitted stories. Thank you. It's comforting to know that I'm not the only one to experience the unknown, and I feel right at home, so thank you for that. And that being said, I would like to share with you just one of the many unexplained experiences from my childhood. This one in particular has haunted me my entire life. This day has always been a clear memory for me, and has always scared the hell out of me since. So, just to give a little context here, when I was a kid, I always had a really bad habit of sitting on the arms of our family's sofas, and it was one of my dad's pet peeves. So, of course, he would always yell at me for doing this. I think the year was either 1995 or 1996. So, on the day in question, I would have been 5 to 6 years old. I didn't have school that day, so I was at home during the daytime and my mom was home too, but being the neat freak she's always been, she was busy cleaning the house. My dad was at work, so I was just kind of bored and wandering around the house when, just as I walked into my living room, who else do I see but my dad? And there he is, just sitting on the arm of the sofa, the exact same way that he always hated. But he had a weird energy about him, and looked slightly different. His eyes were black, and his skin was really pale, much more than his usual complexion. I just remember being completely caught off guard, not only because I was constantly getting in trouble for doing that very thing, but he was supposed to be working still, as it was late morning, early afternoon, and he would work the standard 9 to 5. So, I ask him, why is he sitting like that if it was bad? He doesn't respond. He only stares at me. I followed up by asking him, aren't you supposed to be working? Once again, not a single response, just a creepy, lifeless stare. I start feeling unsettled and run off to go find my mom to let her know that Dad was home. I find her in one of the bedrooms in the back of the house and let her know Dad's home, prompting us to walk out into the living room. But when we walk around the corner, no one is there. He was gone. I assume he just left to go back to work, but later on that evening, after coming home from work at the usual time, as we were talking, I decided to ask him why he came home earlier in the day, followed by why is it okay for him to sit on the end of the couch but I couldn't. A puzzled look comes over his face as he explains to me that he was at work all day and had absolutely no clue what I was even talking about. The thing about my dad is he's always been a straight shooter, a no-nonsense guy, and never one to joke around. So, if that was not my dad that I interacted with, then who or what was it? And furthermore, what in the hell did it want from me? I would hope that perhaps my story may help inspire other people with similar experiences to come forward and share theirs as well. Hey Raven. While I have a few stories of my own that I plan on submitting, this one is about my son. We will call him R. It happened about 6 months ago when he was 6. He came out of his room one morning and let out a big sigh. He told my husband and I that he hadn't been sleeping well, and our conversation went something like this. Me: "I'm sorry to hear that, bud. Do you know why?" Thinking it might be bad dreams, growing pains, etc. Him: "A guy is in my room at night." My heart drops. I try to stay calm. I look at my husband and we're in a silent agreement to not escalate the situation. We often say R is in his own world. He's full of imagination and wonder. My husband: "A guy? Like you keep dreaming about someone coming in your room?" R: "No, he's really in there, but maybe he's not a guy. I don't know. He has the shape of a human, but he's all misty black." Me: "What does he do?" R: "Well, I wake up and look at the edge of my bed and he rises up from there." Me: "Does he say anything? Do you try to talk to him?" Him: "No, he doesn't say anything. I don't either, because the longer I stare at him, the taller he gets. He goes up to the ceiling over me. I just close my eyes and go back to sleep eventually. I don't want to walk past him to come and get you." Me: "How long has he been coming in your room?" R: "At least 3 nights now. That's why I'm so tired." Me: "Does he make you feel scared?" R: "Not really, but I don't feel safe either. He has a knife in his hand. I feel like he wants to scare me but won't actually hurt me." At this point, I get up and grab all of my cleansing tools and begin to clear his room. I'm a practicing witch and energy healer. My husband asks R to draw him. My son then draws what I can only describe as a shadow person. The only distinct feature is its orange eyes, which he said kind of glow. He came in the room as I was clearing it and said, "I'm gonna kind of miss him. I think he was used to people being scared of him and was just lonely." I told him while that might be the case, he was keeping R from getting good sleep, and there's no reason that any spirit or human should try to be scaring a child. I tried to keep it as light as to not instill any fear that might attract more spirits or make him feel any more uneasy. I was confident in my ability to clear the room and protect it. Ever since I did, my son hasn't seen him again. I refresh it every so often and spray Florida water in there every night before bed. R cut out the drawing of the figure and carried it around a while. He named it 99. Eventually, he used it as inspiration to create an entire story about characters with number names: 99, 88, 66, etc. This was eye-opening for me, and now I make sure he knows how to protect his energy, and I keep the house cleansed regularly. He's drawn to spooky things, so I'm glad this lesson came up while he was young, as I'm sure this won't be the last of his encounters. Hi Raven, this is my second submission only. I appreciate you giving us a place to hear these stories and not feel crazy, so thank you. I get ghost visitors mainly. I've been getting ghost visitors since I was a young child. I would even talk to them. Eventually, I was getting scary ghosts coming, and so I began fearing them. I recently opened my eyes to how I have been giving my power to these ghosts. More and more, I seemed to have attracted negative energy from the ghost realm, but I think it was from my fear of them. As I grew up, I was metaphorically running away from them. I was usually alone when they'd come, and I eventually hated their visits. But this year, 2024, I had my first, quote, alien visit. My husband and I were in bed. It was dark, approximately 2 a.m. For the first time ever, one came when I was not alone. I was shocked. I instantly turned my head, seeing my husband was beside me. I, for the first time, confronted the intrusive visitor. I stopped, quote, running away by pretending to be asleep and being scared out of my mind. Something inside me woke up unconsciously to protect my husband from its dark energy. I wouldn't have it. If it was Satan himself, I would stop him. Above me, as I was lying in bed, was a floating alien head inside a circular black smoke. No body, only the head. The smoke moved constantly, slowing in a circular formation. I felt the entity had ill intentions. My husband was sleeping beside me. I turned my head back to the alien head floating above me in fury. It too was looking at my husband in those seconds as I was, but it was smirking at my husband when I looked back at it, and that pissed me off even more. I did not fear it. Something inside me woke up. The protector. I spoke to it in fury, but from my mind, I knew it could hear me. How dare you come here with him here? It looked at me at the same time I looked back at it. I stared up at its glowing red eyes furiously, and I felt that my eyes were just as red. It did not speak. I said for it to go away now. It poofed away as instantly as it appeared, and I went back to normal. I was no longer mad, and my protector's side in me went back to sleep. So now, when I get intrusive visitors, you feel them coming into your force field or in your dreams trying to possess you. I'm aware of their presence, and I internally confront them, not afraid. I no longer run away. I ask them internally, why are you here? What do you want? Go away. If they don't, I tell them, God's light is in you too, and God's love is in you too. He is here and where you are. Connect to God because you are capable as I am capable to talk to him. They usually disappear then. Thanks again, and I appreciate you reading my story. My aunt was a great person. She always had a laugh that made you happy to be around her, and her eyes would twinkle. She was smart and funny, hardworking, but never a complainer. I was sad when I learned that she had cancer, and eventually she died from it. She had a lot of nice things, including new winter robes. My first cousin, Ralph, was expecting his wife to have their first child soon. She, therefore, needed a good winter robe, and had been gifted the robes that would fit her pregnant self. My aunt was on the larger side. Several nights, both my cousin and his wife would catch just a glimpse of that robe passing by with a slippered foot, and that is all that they would see. So that, my friends, was the second collection of paranormal / haunting / ghost / shadow people stories. More of those this time around, which is interesting. I don't usually get a whole lot of those, but this time felt like there were actually several. So, anyways, that was a second collection of paranormal stories coming at you this week. This week had 2 because I had a lot. Yeah. So, based on my schedule, the next paranormal video will not be till the 26th of September, which is a third paranormal collection this month, which is a lot. I don't usually do that many, so hopefully y'all are enjoying the paranormal stories. If not, well, this is not the month for you, apparently. If so, whee! Anyways, if you guys did enjoy the stories, please do hit that like button. Please like the video. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider hitting the subscribe button and the little bell icon next to it. You know how that stuff works. You can also, let's see, leave me a comment. Nope, now I gotta stretch. Now I gotta stretch. Why do I do this to myself? I should not stretch while I'm recording outros. You can also leave me a comment down below the video if you feel ever so bold and want to say hi, that kind of thing. You can also join Patreon or memberships, get early access to content like this and other things depending on what you sign up for. You can also do a super thanks, which is a tip to the channel. Never expected, always appreciated. Or if you're not wanting to listen on YouTube anymore, you can listen on Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Pandora, anywhere you get your podcasts at. Just search As the Raven Dreams. I'm probably there. Similar channel art, so you'll see it, you know. How's your week going? Pretty good? Mine's gone pretty good. It was vacation week. We did vacation earlier this week. Today for dinner we went to a ramen place nearby that was really good. It was fantastic. Patients had curry ramen. I had the tuna don rice bowl, which was cubed raw tuna. It was sushi. It was tuna with corn and edamame with rice, and it was all sauced. And we had takoyaki for the first time, and that stuff's good. I don't even like octopus, and that stuff was really good. And it was not expensive, so that was fantastic. That's all. What'd you have for dinner? Nothing? Anything? Peanut butter and jelly? Went to a peanut butter and jelly restaurant? It's cool. Never heard of one. You should talk to them about moving here, because I want to go. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Anyways, friends, hope you're having a beautiful day. Hope you have a beautiful weekend. Hope I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved. You are valid. You are important. You are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it. And do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love and sleep well.